The Amber Mack Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mack Show. Well, as much as we like to talk about AI threats on the show, today we're going to talk about how AI helped a young developer build something in 3 weeks to make government data useful and accessible for Canadians. Plus, he tells us why he had his grandparents in mind when he designed the site.
That's awesome, and I'm totally looking forward to that interview. Amber and I will also share what parents need to know about the new ChatGPT for teens, the crazy places Amazon drones are dropping off packages, and the AI boss at a San Francisco store that just fired its first human. There's a lot more than that, so let's get right into the headlines.
Headlines.
Well, OpenAI recently launched ChatGPT for Teens, a special version of its popular AI chatbot specifically aimed at teenage users. As OpenAI describes it, ChatGPT for Teens is, quote, an experience designed to help teens learn, think critically, deepen understanding, and use AI with confidence. It provides stronger built-in safety protections for teens, including features to promote healthy use and additional controls for parents. If our system estimates someone is under 18 or they state their age is between 13 and 17, they are automatically placed into ChatGPT for Teens.
Okay, I think like many parents, I have a few questions about this. And the first question is, it's not that clear exactly how well an AI could actually gauge the age difference between someone who is a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old, or a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old. So it's really hard, I think, for most parents to be comforted by this claim, which of course aligns very well with the fact that AI companies are constantly promising things, Jeff, that they can't reliably deliver on. But I don't think I'd have too much confidence in this mechanism to judge exactly how old a user actually is.
Yeah, and to depend on kids to enter their own age is probably not very likely, so totally agree. And tech analyst Carmi Levy was interviewed on CTV last week, and he referenced the fact that many people have also already claimed to get by the AI guardrails without much issue, saying, quote, change a couple of your answers, and the next thing you know, you've managed to supersede those limitations, end quote. And we've seen a lot of that in the past. He also points out that ChatGPT for Teens is designed to make parents think their children are safer, and so help them think that, this doesn't really require the same level of oversight for these kind of online activities. To this, he warns, quote, parents should not assume that OpenAI has their kids' best interests at heart. They should also not assume that these technologies are perfect, end quote. And I think we've covered both of those things so many times that I'm hoping people are starting to get the message. These companies are not doing this for you. And what they say their technologies can do doesn't always match what their technologies can actually do.
And he's certainly not alone in those warnings, with the Associate General Counsel for AI and Privacy at Fair Play, a children's advocacy group, noting that, and I'm quoting here, announcements like these can be seen as a step in the right direction, but I also would caution against parents being lured into this false sense of safety based on the announcement. Now, we have covered on the show how AI chatbots have encouraged young people to take their own lives or instructed them in how they could commit mass shootings, and even coach them on how to conceal eating disorders or drug use. And it's not like OpenAI or other AI makers wanted their AIs to do any of that. So why should we actually believe that a special teen version is going to be able to do any better?
Absolutely. Those are terrible failures that you just listed there. And to all that stuff, it's always like, oh, yes, obviously this isn't intentional. We're going to change things so that it'll work better. But I mean, as just reported in Mashable last week or a week or so before this announcement, a 17-year-old boy in Massachusetts was accused of murdering his mother and his younger brother after, quote, using ChatGPT to play out fantasy stories involving their deaths, end quote. So, you're totally right to point out that these are far from being solved problems. They persist. And so to have the same company that can't seem to solve those things say, oh, but don't worry, we figured it out for teens, it just strains credulity for sure.
And we know, based on the data, that more than 70% of teens in the US, probably comparable here in Canada, are using AI chatbots for companionship. I mean, that's a massive number.
Mhm.
So we are in some really dangerous waters here. I should also note that Fair Play pointed out that some very important safeguards require parental controls to be used, and or aren't in place by default on teen accounts. So that kind of thing is not going to help with trust either. And Jeff, if I can just add one thing on this. I think the goal is to discourage teens to use these tools and technologies, especially if they themselves, these AI makers, know as they do that it's not a safe environment for young people. I mean, why focus on teens at all? That's the part I don't understand.
I totally agree. And, I think one of the examples of the safeguards that require parental controls or aren't turned on is stuff like using Chat GPT in the wee hours of the morning or stuff like that. If you're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, uh, you can probably just set the chatbot to say, hey, dude, it's a little late to be talking. You don't need parents to get into the middle of that. And so it just always seems like the level of sincerity in terms of concern doesn't match the actions taken. And, to talk about a completely different area that's like that and involves OpenAI, and it's far beyond child safety. It's all of our safety. OpenAI's chief global affairs officer recently warned once again about AI cyber attacks, saying, quote, people are going to be able to access these open source models. And he's talking about Chinese models mostly there. People are going to be able to access these open source models and be able to have ongoing, persistent cyber attacks on you. And you're going to need to have really superior models to fend them off and defend yourself. That's not necessarily going to make the public feel great about things. It is just the reality of where we're going, end quote.
It really is a chilling situation. A founding director of the UK's AI Safety Institute has also weighed in, saying of the AI companies that, quoting here, they are being really reckless and increasingly taking their hands off the wheel. Nobody should be building more powerful AI systems because we don't know how to control them, align them, and look inside and see what they're thinking well enough. So again, I mean, the writing's on the wall. This is something that I think we need to kind of put the brakes on here or pause things. But certainly when it comes to teens and our kids, these are not necessarily safe places for them to be.
No, and the cyber attack stuff, like look at how it's grown over the years, like the spam stuff out there and all sorts of different now with deep fakes and AI agents calling you up. It's just crazy. And now I can't argue with his assessment of what's happening here, but there is a bit of a catch-22. China is not going to stop building more powerful AI systems. And so even though I don't think U.S. AI companies are terribly motivated by what's in the best interests of humanity as a whole, and to be clear, I sure as heck don't think that Chinese companies are any better at that than American companies, probably worse and can be directed by the government to do things that even they don't want to do. But the catch-22 is that you can kind of understand why they feel that we need to race forward in a defensive sense to create technologies that are better than these Chinese ones that may be a few months behind or something. But this is all just the result of opening this Pandora's box. And now we're staring into a future of potentially tragic consequences if we can't figure this stuff out. But it's totally not clear that we're going to be able to figure this stuff out in time. And he warns of like hacking into military systems and things like that. This is not just, oh, your grandma's going to get scammed. This is, could be global level consequences for some of this stuff.
And before we talk a little bit about AI costs, which we've certainly talked about on the show in the past, Jeff, one of the things that I can't stop thinking about, especially in the middle of this trade war that we are having here in Canada with the United States, and most recently with the president coming out with a statement saying how difficult Canadians are to deal with and we're taking advantage of them. I mean, you have to ask yourself this question, which I don't think we do enough. How dependent are we on U.S. technology, and is that really a safe place to be in? Whether it's with our kids or our businesses. I mean, we do have to, I think, act more seriously about this.
Absolutely, and you're right that there's kind of the two big actors, China and the States. Maybe if this stuff happened to a decade or more ago, there'd be more confidence here, but it's hard to trust either of those bodies with that stuff. So yeah, it's just left in the hands of people who are probably the only people who can save us, who are more interested in making money and fame for themselves. So yeah, just another one of the incredible, risky parts of AI that is you know, having an impact on all of us, and will certainly have an impact on every single last one of us in time.
Well, Jeff, I'm sure that since Elon Musk has Canadian citizenship and many of these big companies like OpenAI have Canadians who are at, the top of these C-suites, I'm sure they're going to come out and defend Canada any day now, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah. No, it's just crazy how docile and cowed these guys are.
All right. Well, the AI race has other more literal costs, which we're seeing related in announcements such as recent NVIDIA warning customers that its servers containing AI chips will increase in price by 15% or more starting early next year because of increased memory costs, which we've talked about in recent episodes as well. Amazon has also put its GPU prices up 20%, and AMD has increased its prices as well.
And we've covered, Apple and Microsoft and other price rises, and so the memory shortage is coming for consumers too in terms of costs increasing. And Amazon recently just increased prices for things like its Fire TVs, its Kindle readers, and other products. And as one striking example, the price of Amazon's popular Echo Dot smart speaker has just gone up by 60%, 60%. So that's a pretty incredible jump, and doesn't exactly bode well for how affordable that some of these tech products are going to be going into the future.
It sure is. And what goes hand in hand with the memory shortage? Well, AI data centers, which brings us to our next story. We've covered the pushback against data centers many times. It's everywhere in the media. And this is driving companies to find novel new locations, perhaps with the view of out of sight, out of mind. Speaking of Elon Musk, Elon has talked about data centers in space, but the South Korean city of Ulsan is now partnering with the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology to build new data centers under the ocean.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting. So the space thing, part of it is justified by the cooling, uh, the fact that you can do cooling out there, although the costs to get up there are pretty incredible. But yeah, so that one of the attractions to building underwater, in this case it's 20 meters or about 66 feet below the ocean, is that you can just use seawater to provide cooling because it's obviously a lot cooler than the air around it typically. And the goal of this project is to create a carbon neutral model for undersea data centers. So that's great. At first, I was not sure if this was just motivated by the shortage of space on the Korean Peninsula and stuff like that, something we don't have a problem with here in Canada with lots of empty space. But yeah, so it's good to see that the goal is to provide a model to be carbon neutral. Unfortunately, it's only supposed to be completed around 2030, so we'll have to wait to see how things look then. I believe there are people who think that AI will be in control of everything then, so who knows where this will even be, but it's getting harder and harder to talk about what 5 years in the future will look like.
I don't know why, but right now, maybe it's because I'm slightly sleep deprived. I keep having that Disney song about under the sea, and I imagine all the characters running into a data center and how that changes things.
I like it. That's a good spoof.
It is, absolutely. So, hopping back to North America, an experimental retail store run entirely by AI has just fired its first human employee. Now, a lot of people may jump to the conclusion that this was done with merciless computer efficiency, but in fact, the employee was late for 17 of their 23 shifts, and the firing actually required the intervention of humans at the company running the experiment. So, Jeff, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty bad track record in terms of being late.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I think it had issued some warnings and stuff like this, but it appears that basically the AI store manager had just lost track of the significance of employees, getting to work on time. So it had to be told by the company running this experiment to, hey, maybe search your memory for some relevant policies about this, and then decide what should be done with the worker, which is not exactly hugely inspiring in terms of the narrative of AI being able to capably take over all human work, but kind of fascinating experiment. As outlined on Business Insider, the company Andon Labs gave the AI a budget of $100,000, gave it a corporate credit card and internet access, and then instructed it to open a store in San Francisco and to turn a profit. So the store was open. It sells books, games, candles, other stuff like that. And it opened maybe fittingly on April Fool's Day and has made some sales, but the making a profit part has yet to happen. So it's an experiment, but it's an interesting one. And that sort of AI human resource part of it doesn't seem to have really lived up to the ruthless efficiency that we might think that AI would be coming for our jobs with.
Well, I think these experiments are actually kind of interesting and sort of prove the point that we've talked about on the show in the past, that it is a total fallacy that AI is going to be able to do all these jobs that humans can do. And more experiments like this, I think, really demonstrate that. Now, in other signs of AI wading into spaces once reserved for humans, Reddit has begun to incorporate what it calls real conversations voiced by AI by turning its text posts into AI read videos on the platform, a feature that I think it's fair to say probably not a single human ever asked for. And I'm surprised actually that Reddit is doing this, because I feel like they are ones to always kind of stand up to AI in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know where the motivation for that comes from, but Reddit CEO Steve Huffman does. He's talked about letting people listen to posts in the background is sort of the goal there. And to me, that's just further wading into the slop reality of humans not being able to focus on any single thing, whether that's paying through the nose to go out to see a movie and then for some reason scrolling on their TikTok while it's on, which is just nuts, but you see it all the time, or deciding, hey, I'm just driving here, probably a good time to check my phone, or the million other examples we see showing that the human operating system is basically being brutally hacked to render us into some dysfunctional puppets controlled by the increasingly taut strings of our device dependencies. So in a nutshell, shame on you, Reddit. You're supposed to be one of the last refuges of mostly human content on the social web, and I, for one, really thought you were better than that.
Wanted to talk about a survey of hundreds of developers by Coddy Tech, a programming and training company. They found that 80% of developers say their AI use has felt more like a dependence than an advantage, with many saying that the tools are useful, but also that their habitual reliance on AI is weakening their own problem solving process, expanding their workload, and fostering an unhealthy relationship with work.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me very much. I talk to a lot of developers. I run the Third Wednesday meetup here in Halifax, the longest running one in town, and they all have pretty mixed feelings about how AI has infiltrated coding work. And a big problem, and something we've tried to hammer home, both of us, in any discussion about using AI for work, is that AI output often seems more correct than it actually is, which means extra work for humans trying to figure out if something is indeed right, or in the case of programming, functioning correctly, which, if you've ever had to debug something, is very annoying and very time consuming. It's easier to do it right the first time than it is to find, like, the worst curse in programming is looking for bugs in somebody else's code. Well, AI code has lots of bugs, and it's certainly the most foreign somebody else you could ever have to work with.
Yeah, it's a topic that we're going to get to as well in the interview that's coming up, but more of a positive example of using AI when it comes to coding. Wanted to switch gears. We talked about Amazon a bit earlier, but it seems like their Amazon Prime Air drones are having some growing pains too, with more reports, some complete with vaguely comical videos, coming out showing that the drones are dropping customers' packages directly into swimming pools, ponds, and the like.
Yeah, some of those are pretty funny, and even there's some directly into pools. I saw one where it's where it drops the package is going to be right, except the actual air from the drone's propellers blows it into the pool or lake or whatever it was. Anyway, it's bad enough having Amazon's ground delivery drivers so often parking like total morons. I've even had one of them pull one of their big trucks up into my driveway to deliver things to other people at nearby houses, not even my own house, pull a big truck into my house so they can do some deliveries. Anyway, so I'm not looking forward to seeing what happens when they start dropping packages from the air, but I definitely see the potential for some injury lawsuits coming in the future as that service expands.
Speaking of lawsuits, there's a new one in California against the Aura Ring fitness tracker that claims that the device's sleep tracking is just AI guesswork. That's, quoting here, based on improper inputs and thus taking advantage of desperate consumers who struggle with their sleep or are concerned for their health by selling faulty AI based inference as reliable science.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fair. I think there's an awful lot of that kind of thing, the kind of AI guesswork going on with devices these days. And I mean, you mentioned in the opening, OpenAI's age approximation efforts are just like that. And it's like, what are they based on? Like that, how well do those work? And I can only imagine what their OpenAI's upcoming device is going to pretend it can do based on whatever sensors would be in it. But I've definitely raised an eyebrow at some of these smart ring claims myself. But your son has an Aura ring. Amber, what's his take on it?
Yeah, he loves his Aura Ring. I mean, he's using it on a regular basis. I found it actually really good for him to better understand the importance of sleep because when he has a good sleep score, it gives him a sense of, okay, you know what, I'm ready to take on the day. So I would say, listen, I think we understand that it's sort of imperfect. I mean, it's kind of loose in terms of the measurement piece of it, but generally speaking, for him, I actually find that it's been overwhelmingly a massive positive in his life because he's starting to understand the importance of sleep and the connection between a good night's sleep and a productive day, especially as he's just wrapping up 6 a.m. shifts at his job, prepping food and washing dishes.
Well, and it's totally fair. I feel the same way about Apple Watch stuff where I'm like, this is kind of kludgy. Like your stand goals and stuff like that, where it's like, I've been standing for an hour. You don't register that, but I think that could still have a net effect that is positive. I'm not much for jewelry, so I'm probably not going to know much about the Oura Ring situation, but I do know that, gathering that kind of data needs to be paired with being able to access the data in order to be useful. And our next guest is going to talk about exactly that, how he's helping citizens to understand data when it comes to the kind of things that the government collects. And that's after the break, so stick around and check it out.
The Amber Mack Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
There's a lot of talk about making government data more transparent and accessible, but we're a long way from that happening here in Canada, and I'd have to guess in most other countries around the world. Thankfully, with advances in AI and other technologies, it's easier than ever for everyday citizens to build online. And that's exactly what University of Waterloo computer scientist graduate Michael Booth did. A few days ago, Michael launched a program called Canada Clearly, and it takes official data about how Canada and its people live, work, grow, and change, and then makes it easy to explore, understand, and verify. Michael spoke with Amber on the platform's launch day. Here's their conversation.
Talking Tech.
Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Such a huge honor to be on the show.
I am so excited about what you've built, and I think Canadians all across the country will be keen to get their hands on information and data about everything that's happening in this country in one place in a really seamless fashion. So before we get into what you've built, let's start with the day that you decided that this was something that Canada needed. Why this?
Yeah. So that day, I couldn't even tell you the exact day because it would be many, many years ago. I have always been what I call a stats nerd. So, I got my degree in computer science. I've always been around computers and like math and statistics, but I also love sports, hockey fan, football fan, I golf. Statistics is the foundation of both those worlds. So I've always looked at data. I've always wanted to know where the best data is. And Stats Canada has disappointed me for pretty much as long as I can remember in the easeability of finding it and the usability of it. And it's a common complaint I hear, across Twitter and industry and people who look at various policies and such. And this wasn't my first attempt at making a site. I actually attempted to make sort of a version of this back in university. And it didn't really go much of anywhere. It was, more of a learning experience, I would say. Never really got off the ground floor. And then maybe about 3 weeks ago, I decided I wanted to give this another shot. And what made me decide now was the time, was I was playing around more with frontier LLM AI models. And I was really impressed at the latest releases website building ability. It's a very basic functionality, but I've been using these tools for years now, and it really got a lot of the polish on it that I hadn't seen in the past. So I decided to give it a shot at creating it with these tools, and I'm very impressed with how it's gone. So I'm sure I'll talk about more later how I used it. The site itself doesn't use AI at all, and there's no plans to add it to the site itself, but AI helped me build the site. And without it, I wouldn't be able to collect the hundreds of data sets I already have.
It's pretty amazing when you even utter that phrase 3 weeks ago, I decided I was gonna start building this because we kinda take that for granted today. I've been in the tech industry for a long time. You mentioned, you went to school for computer science, and we really do live in a very interesting time in 2026. So before we get into more details about, all of, the information that people now have at their fingertips in a much more streamlined way because of what you've built. What do you think about this moment in time where someone with some tech skills can decide to build something that I would argue is infinitely better than what even the government of Canada has built?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, with what I and how long I've been using AI, how long I've been in the tech industry, I've had a professional job. I still have a daytime job in the tech world for about 4 years now. It really is changing quick with these latest tools. Especially in the coding, programming, and math world. So I don't know how far AI will extend outside of that. Those aren't my domains of expertise, and I think they still have a lot of ways to go in a lot of those areas. But fundamentally, they can go bat for bat with the best programmers in the world already, the best mathematicians. I think programming is closer to math than it is to English in a lot of ways. And I think that's why computers maybe were better at understanding them first. I'm not quite at that theoretical level, but I do think that programming ability of AI is far above its other abilities. And this has led me, I was using it as different tools, different projects between work and my own time, seeing what it's capable of. And this was mostly me experimenting with what can be built quickly by just myself. And, I have now, I think I'm up to 300 data sets in total at day by day building. And the big difference, I would say, like I still review all the work that goes in. But for example, I was visiting my parents the other day and they were like, where do you have the time to work on this? Right? Like you have a job. When are you working on this? And I was like, well, it's actually being worked on right now on my computer. So, I have an agent that's currently building this. And after dinner, when I go back, I'm going to review its output. I'm going to give it critiques on what I think could be added to polish, and then I'll add it in. So a lot on what I've been building over the last 3 weeks is not so much like you create something that could create one data set or grab one chart. It's you create the foundation so that you give it hard rules on where these data sources are coming from. Because I've expanded past just Statistics Canada. I've had some, home building statistics in from some national home building associations and things like that. So, what data streams do I want to keep in that I believe are either official or quasi official enough that I think they're a valid authoritative cert by some, national advocacy organization, making it clear this is the data where it comes from. But the ability of one person to do all this with just a few prompts and describing it, and it really just changes everything. I still think we're at the point where having that fundamental knowledge is important. For example, I know I'm going to have to host this website, and hosting a website can cost a lot of money if you don't do it right. So I've been building it the entire time with that in mind to keep hosting costs down. There's no database that runs with it live. It's all cache static images and data because that's a much, much cheaper way to run. Maybe down the line, if the site grows a lot, I'll have to change that. But that's sort of a good problem to have because then that means the site is actually growing and people like it. And, I think the fundamental knowledge is what's allowed me to build it so quickly and know where I should go and when. But truly a lot of the hard programming work that I would spend a lot of times doing, what they call the grunt work that's given to lower level, newer employees, where you're doing a lot of manual, even though you're writing code, you data sets, you got to look at the numbers yourself. You got to be like, okay, they live under these folders and Stats Canada's, right? It's just stuff that AI now, it doesn't make mistakes when it grabs these simple informations. People are really concerned about hallucinations, as they should be with AI. But how I use AI is mostly to write code, and then that code is repeatable and there's no hallucinations as you use it and test it and such. So
What did your parents say when you said, "Oh, don't worry, I have an agent working on this right now"?
no, they were definitely very surprised. I think it's still a bit hard to grasp, really. They also were very surprised because I was like, yeah, I just started working on this like 2 weeks ago. I posted on Twitter and I got invited on this radio show as well. They're like, well, like, how did anyone even see it? So that's another thing I think that is, changing with the world in when they grew up, but is something that has been so common in my life is if I make something that I find cool, I can post it on Twitter or Reddit or some social media site, and people that I don't even know, but they share a same hobby or a same, desire to have some sort of product, they'll find it cool and tweet it out and such. I've had the greatest support actually from university professors, which shouldn't be a surprise. Those people love their data. They have to interact with Stats Canada for their research and stuff, and they would much prefer a better way of doing it. So they've been a very good sort of beta testers, and I'm very excited because I want to expand the site more to just data, but to a whole civic literacy tool. One suggestion that I've got based on the site that I'm working on, and it will be in one of the future releases soon, is a platform manifesto checker. So this isn't one that's political in any way or makes judgments about whether policy is smart or not, but people can upload a file or paste in parts of someone's campaign, and it will tell them, do they have the authority to do this under Canadian law? Because our separations of power, municipal, provincial, and federal, can get a bit complicated. And it's my opinion, following politics, that politicians like to play into that confusion a bit, and they like to, mess with the lines about where stuff can really come from. So I think there's a lot of ways that this foundational data, when you really get it in and you get it reading all the different sources of where these powers come from, it can very easily analyze these and give clear cut where, you're talking about healthcare with family. We know it's shared provincial and federal. That's an easy one. But there's smaller ones that get down to the more nitty gritty, like bike lanes between municipal and provincial. Who really is in charge of bike lanes? And I think stuff is important for Canadians to be able to easily tell when someone's making a promise in politics, can they actually follow through? There's a lot of civic literacy. I think that our system is, a bit complicated, and, it can use some efforts to make people understand it better.
Well, I think that is a brilliant idea. And I do want to just jump back to when you said that you could post something that you've built on Twitter and someone would reach out. I am that someone. And I appreciate you responding. So let's talk about what you've built, because selfishly, one of the reasons that I was interested is that I find that there is so much debate about issues on Twitter and other platforms and face to face that is totally devoid of facts and data. So we need to get back to this point where we actually have so much data that we're able to access in a really easy way. So, what can people find when they visit the site?
No, absolutely. And I think that's a core reason as well why I felt the need to build it is I found so much discussion just meaningless where it's like, what are you even saying? How do we know it's true? How do we know any of this is adding up? And it's from both sides, it's from everything. No one can really say a lot of times what's going on. So right now, if you go to the site, I have six sort of topic measures that you start with that people can go to. So there's people and communities, which is stuff mostly about population, social conditions, stuff like that. We then have health and living standards, which is where you're going to find things like healthcare, income, housing. Then we have work in the economy, which is standard jobs, prices, trade. Learning and innovation is the next one. So education, skills, research, development. We have environmental and infrastructure. So emissions, energy, where are we getting it from, what types, and then finally government and civic life. So there really are a lot of broad topics. I would say ones that people care about, I found a lot, are immigration is always a hot button issue. And that I think is a good example why I bring it up, because when people talk about immigration, That's not one thing. There's many, many streams of immigration that lead people into Canada, lead people out of Canada. One number isn't going to tell you the whole story about immigration. One number isn't going to tell you the whole story about much of anything. So, one common complaint, and this is actually what I was reading as Stats Canada has put out some publications on their journey for web modernization. And I actually had an internship, not in Stats Canada, but with the federal government employee, and I enjoyed it. But what I realized at that time, with a lot of places, is change is slow. You need a lot of approval layers. It takes a lot for a small idea to actually make it into a production release. But when you're on a one-person job, if I have a small idea, I can push it to beta just in a few minutes if I want to. So the ability, I think, to respond to feedback much quicker than Stats Canada is one thing that will lead me to give these graphs that people want, and demand will lead there. So I built in an easy way on the beta site for people to report feedback, request new charts. What do you not see so easy? So I do want it to be a living site in that people will use it and then tell me how they want it to improve, what's best. But off the bat, I try to focus on things like healthcare, health transfers, immigration, interprovincial trade, because that has also become a big talking point in Canada since tariffs and such took over. So just getting those, I think, foundational structures that impact people most would be my number one task. And then from there, providing, the more edge cases and going further back is definitely a future goal. Right now, it's a lot of modern stats, 2000 onwards, because that's when a lot of the high quality data sets have been kept up. There's more historical data that can provide context and help. But I definitely right now focus more on collecting modern statistics on what I think are the core parts of people's lives, which are, healthcare, infrastructure, transportation, immigration. And that's where I really want high quality data.
So, just for people who are unfamiliar, myself included, how up to date is the data from StatsCan?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it really depends on the data set. And this is something that I obviously can improve because I'm not collecting any data firsthand. I am just collecting and organizing data that other people supply. And some things are much more up to date. For example, Stats Canada has a population projector that goes like basically up to the minute or hour, so you can find out what they're projecting the population is at any given point. Some other data sets haven't been updated since 2024. So I would say, depending on how hard the data is, there are a lot of 2024 cutoffs. Something, as Canada as a whole can improve, I think like we should try to get at least 2025 data by now. It's been 6 months. I understand it's hard to capture, but it really is a fundamental part of a lot of this is going to be the sourcing of the data. So it's going to be quasi real time, and it does make a clear page on what's real time, what isn't real time. And eventually, I think it would be good to add in more projections to the site, make it clear these are the site's own projections, but based on the data trends, here are three projections that we can give. And I think it's also something that comes up with projections that link closely in data is accountability. You see so many projections, and then 5, 10 years later, who knows how well they held up? Who knows if that informed them to make a change in their future projections? I think that is something that I also want to explore with the site is looking back on official projections made over the last 5, 10, 15 years. How have they held up? Are we constantly undershooting things? I think those are things that we can analyze better now with the ability to use AI to gather these data sets, because it takes millions of data sets you have to compare. And the gathering of data really is what I'm using AI to excel at. And I think that's how I can continue to increase the usefulness of the site.
It's interesting too, from what I've seen so far, we're looking on your site at mostly data that I think is relevant on a national level, some provincial details as well. But like you said, I mean, there is an opportunity down the road to get even more granular than that. I'm thinking I live in Toronto, and there is so much data accessible, even from organizations like the Toronto Police, where you're able to look out at crime data per neighborhood. If you've ever gone through the process of actually doing that, you start to realize very quickly that it is impossible to figure out any of the maps that they've put in place. I mean, it's all just a total hot mess. What do you think is missing in terms of that layer and that is more user friendly to the average person?
Yeah. No, I think that is definitely the big question that's asked of governments commonly is the usability of it. And I think, um, in my experience, it's probably a mix of things. I think one is right now, so much of the data is fragmented across municipal, provincial, federal, organizations within those structures. And historically, they've never been good at working with each other, different levels of government, and duplicating each other's work instead of supplementing or adding to each other's work. And I think that one is how you get a lot of things that are built over time. And as long as they work, they don't care so much about the usability experience of it. As long as, the site keeps running and the core foundation of it does, that's the purpose of the site. They can say we did our jobs, we put the information out there, so to speak. And I think another part is that web development is genuinely not an easy thing. No aspect in life is, but making something easy to use and accessible is a very big challenge in itself. And I think that it just wasn't where the resources were going, and the resources were going to collect the data that they did. And it just, no one had put in the time. And, looking at the Stats Canada's web modernization, it's already over like a year long, and they haven't really, done much besides like collect information and collect feedbacks and collect plans. I think a lot of it is just being very slow to react to feedback on government agencies as well. I think inherently, because of their structure, it makes it tough for any one person to make a big impact, and everything, in my experience, you got to run it up the pole, and minor changes can be nixed for safe. Like, they don't want to make a big splash. They don't want to make a big change. Like, they're more worried about doing a redesign that people don't like and just play it safe versus taking a chance. And, something that if you're in the private sector and your company's lagging, you may take a risk to put your company in front and take a chance. But I don't think the government's in, the position or the desire to do that. So it just hasn't been, front of mind. And I think that's my explanation for it.
I can imagine a lot of people who would be able to use your site, but I'm curious what you envision. Can you give me just one use case scenario that maybe has run through your mind as you were building that applies to how an everyday Canadian who maybe isn't that techie would want to access information?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that I draw a lot of my desire to make it easy to use by actually helping my grandparents over the last 10 years learn the world of tech. So my grandfather just turned or is just turning 90. So he definitely did not grow up in the world of tech. But at 90, he has a smartphone, he has a laptop. He can work a lot of basic sites. They watch Netflix on a TV. I'm still teaching them all the time, but if I can have a site where it's like he wonders where he lives in Oakville, for example, you mentioned crime maps. I think that'd be a great addition. And just coming to mind, it feels like car thefts, car robberies have gone down a bit, but I don't know if that's just not in the news as much or if they really have gone down. So someone like my grandfather, if he had the question in his area, like, I wonder if car thefts have gone down, if he's able to actually use my site and get that information and get his answer, that's a big win for me. That's something that I am excited to present them with the site. I think that would be really cool. But my idea is that anyone on any tech level, and I think they're a great beta tester for people who have a low tech level, can have a question, they get an answer. And at the end of the day, what would make me really proud is if I see my data sourced in any type of real policy argument, whether it's by, a politician themselves or just by someone in the advocacy field trying to make a change. I've always been around the world of politics. I don't ever see myself running in politics. The world of politics itself is a brutal place, but I want to make positive change in Canada. So I think if I just was able to contribute positively to some sort of policy debate, that would make me proud.
Well, I certainly would love to see more of this. And I think, again, there's lots of opportunities to build similar platforms like this and so many scenarios. I'm a former journalist. So, imagining that this would be a place that journalists could go and get more streamlined access to information. I mean, again, there's scenario after scenario, including the example of your grandfather. How do you keep this up? How do you sustain this, knowing that there is going to be demand, there are going to be other opportunities, it is going to get expensive in terms of hosting? Uh, do you have a plan in place for that? I know it's early, so I apologize.
No, I definitely do have thoughts, and there are things that you do have to think about early. Is just like, what if it does happen to go viral? And I mentioned this before is a good problem, and if it does, I my immediate idea I think would be more to seek sponsorships for the site than go down any ad route or try to monetize the data or subscription or anything like that. I really do want to keep it very clean, very ad free. I think those get intrusive and make sites harder to use. And I think there are a lot of great Canadian companies out there that would be willing to partner and get their name on the site in some way and say, like, we're proud to help Canadians share the site, and they can help cover the hosting costs. But to be honest, I'm not too concerned off the bat. I have made the site fundamentally in a way that I don't believe server costs will run up unless the site gets very, sorry, I'm blanking on the very popular. And then in that case, the server costs could run up and then I would seek out, but it would need to get pretty popular to go past my testings. And we are in a world right now because of the AI build out, which a lot of people, there's feelings all over the place on data centers, and data centers themselves obviously have so much concerns about them. But one benefit of these AI data center buildouts is compute's getting much cheaper. Hosting is getting much cheaper. I can run this site for a lot less than 5 years ago because there's just so much more compute out there. It's more accessible. Cloudflare is a major company and they give you 100,000 requests a day for free without you paying. And like, that's a good amount of traffic for any small site. So there's ways that I'll keep it running for very low cost for now. As far as time goes, I have a flexible job where I put in the 40 hours a week. I love it. I get it all done, but I have time outside of that and I'll continue working on it for fun. I don't see that changing. I think I'll continue to be able to balance it with work and outside. And, if the site grows so much where that becomes not possible, I'll definitely, choose the site over anything else. But that's what I call a good problem. So I'm not too concerned.
Well, I wish we could nominate you for maybe a chief data officer of Canada role because I feel like you could do this across so many departments and it would be incredibly helpful to Canadians. My final question for you, for people who want to try it out, where is the best place to go? What should they know?
Yeah, you can just go to canadaclearly.ca. That will redirect you to the beta. That's spelled exactly how it sounds. Canada Clearly, CLEARLY.ca. And have at it. I'm hoping that the site would be easy enough where that's all I have to say. And if it isn't, there would be a giant feedback button at the top that you click and just submit a message to me and tell me what you were struggling with. I'd love to hear all kinds of feedback, anything that you want, even if you think it's such a niche thing that not many people would want. I want the site to have everything. So I can't wait to hear back from anyone and everyone who would want to use it.
Michael, thank you so much for answering my DM over on Twitter. I can't call it X.
I can't. I refuse. That is one thing I will refuse. I had a Twitter account for, I want to say 13 years now. I will die with that, saying that.
Well, we are on the same page about that one. And thanks for what you've built. I'm super excited to see this continue to thrive. And maybe you'll come on the show in a few months and we can reconnect as well. But thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to show this to my grandparents. They'll be so proud to see me on Sirius XM. They love that. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Michael and Amber. Coming up next, it's our annual Back to School Tech Roundup for parents who might need a little help this September. That's after the break, so stay tuned.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
The back-to-school season is always such a busy time of the year, and although it's still a couple of weeks away, most parents are already making plans for a smooth September. So to help with some of the tech basics for students and the whole family, here are 3 quick tips.
life hacks.
Although we're living in a digital world, students still need to print documents for school. This is especially true in my home. Whether it's a worksheet, a project, or a permission slip, the HP Smart Tank 7602 all-in-one printer makes it easy to print from the HP app, scan and manage documents, and print wirelessly at home. There's also 3 years of original HP ink included, so that's 8,000 color pages or 6,000 black and white pages without interruption. As a mom, I love having an easy way to print for stress-free school days. Next up, whether you have a student living off campus or students living at home, your Wi-Fi needs to handle the load of streaming, gaming, and hopefully, yes, studying. That's where the TP-Link Deco BE85 can help. This Deco 7 Elite product brings high-end Wi-Fi 7 performance to homes that need more speed, capacity, and wired flexibility. With seamless mesh coverage, a 10G port, and multi-gig connectivity, it is a strong fit for larger homes and busy multi-device networks. So the perfect pick for your home, or even if you have a student who's moving off campus. Now, what about getting help with school transportation? I know as a mom, I absolutely love using Uber teen accounts that allow teens aged 13 to 17, including my 17-year-old son, to request their own rides and even order meals with the consent of a parent or guardian while keeping key safety features automatically enabled. Parents and guardians who add a teen account to their family profile can follow trips in real time, receive status updates, and stay connected from pickup to drop off. Uber Teen accounts include built-in safety features such as PIN verification to help ensure teens are entering the right vehicle, and Ride Check, which can detect if a trip goes unusually off course or stops unexpectedly, and it allows you to check in to make sure that everything is okay. I hope you find these tech tips useful. You can get more information over on my site at ambermac.com, and thank you so much to our brand partners for supporting this campaign.
Hey, I'm Amber Mack, and every time I do a keynote speech, I get asked the same question over and over again. How do you keep up with all things tech? What's happening in artificial intelligence and beyond? Well, every Tuesday, I send out a free email newsletter. Each week, I talk about the latest news in AI, technology, sustainability, and beyond. This is an opportunity to stay on top of all things tech for free. All you have to do is sign up at ambermac.com/newsletter.
As always, if you have any feedback on our headlines, any guest ideas, anything to say about our interview segments or anything else, you can find me at Jeff MacArthur online. You can find Amber at Amber Mac online, and we would love to hear from you. We'll see you next week.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.